Assume the burden. The first step in making people talk is to bring yourself to accept the awesome obligation of getting things started. In starting people talking, the expected, the ordinary, the cliched, the automatic, that which comes naturally, is poor material. Your host lives in a penthouse with a magnificent view of the park. She shows you to the big living room window. It's dusk. The park looks like a Christmas card that hasn't been taken down off the mantelpiece, even though it's mid-April. It's too beautiful. It's your turn to say something. Nobody expects you to be as brilliant as that legendary guest who, standing in precisely such a place, watching two-way traffic at the onset of darkness and seeing the cars down below with their white headlights approaching and red taillights receding, remarked, diamonds going up, rubies going down. You can, however, with preparation, do a little better than merely, gee, great view. You don't have to do much better. Anything better is much better. How about, for example, what's the longest anybody ever just stood here and stared? Forgive me for a minute. I'm trying to decide if I've ever seen a view before to match this one. I'll bet you get a lot of inspiration just standing here and gaping. The Ophthalmologists Association ought to pay to put this view on television, just to make people appreciate their eyesight a little more. A magazine should interview you to try to find out what effect having a view like this has on the rest of your life. You know, in a way, you own everything down there. Forgive me, please. I've just had an overpowering urge to write a poem. Great view is the minimum requirement. In the military, they call it a salute. Something a little more imaginative can turn that perfunctory salute into a back and neck massage. It's a lot easier to forget your saluters than your masseurs. Any of those suggested alternative remarks gives you the chance to keep on going. How do most people react to a scene like this one? What's your favorite time of day to look out that window? Do you ever catch your friends turning away from whatever's going on and just keep on looking out the window? Do you ever see little dramas playing themselves out in the park? Joggers, lovers, that sort of thing. Make it a deliberate mission to get that host to start talking about that view. Isn't it old hat to him? At what point in his tenancy of that apartment will he get tired of hearing how great that view is? The answers are, respectively, no and never. He's proud of that view. Pick something you're proud of. Your face, your chili sauce, your stretch limo, your new slimness, your wine collection, your Scottish burr when you tell ethnic jokes. Do you ever get tired of compliments, particularly good compliments you wish you could collect, signed, and notarize? Do you ever get tired of being asked good, provocative questions about things you're proud of? Chances are you get about as tired talking about your attractions as the underdog candidate gets being interviewed about his stunning upset victory on the Today Show. Oh, it's easy enough to get tired of ordinary people saying, "Nice view." Some people manage to bore you while they're praising you. It's hard to get bored, though, when another person who's proven his worth by handing you a nice, original compliment seems genuinely interested in knowing more. People who wouldn't do things for the proverbial love or money frequently do them for a third, less celebrated but equally potent persuader, attention. We don't all have love. We don't all have money. But we all have equal reserves of attention and the ability to accord it whenever and to whomever we select. Too bad most people roll along utterly oblivious to the power this ability to confer attention can bring. They're akin to Stone Age natives in the Sepik River Valley of New Guinea, at home with rocks and stones and grunts and groans, but totally unaware of the value of the petroleum deposits splashing around a few yards beneath their feet. Those resources are too valuable to waste. They're precious fuel for the ever-hungry furnaces of conversation. Probably the first and definitely the worst joke about psychiatrists deals with the young psychiatrist who asked the old one how he always manages to look so up and fresh and chipper after listening to all those unfortunate people's problems all day. The older psychiatrist shrugs and says, "Who listens?" That's bad, because a joke owes us a sparkling little kernel of truth cunningly revealed. That joke is a lie. Pretending to listen and trying to figure out how to make this deadly dud of a couldn't care less relationship between you two suddenly sizzle and shoot skyward takes a lot more out of you than actually listening. One of the greatest conversations I ever had was the one with Edna. Herb called me the morning of his party about an hour and a half up country and asked, since I was driving, if I'd mind bringing Edna. I can honestly say I hated Herb for a full half minute after that outrageous request. He sounded so casual. Would I call him just as casually and say, "Herb, would you mind climbing up onto one of those torture racks and letting them twist you for about an hour and a half?" That's how the thought of driving Edna struck me. The actual drive with Edna, however, was quite different. Edna was an artist, a subject in which I have no knowledge, no interest, and no patience. I knew that Edna, on the other hand, was hard to move off the subject of art and painting. I further knew that my attitude was wrong and ridiculous. The whole civilized world would have voted with Herb, and it was, therefore, my problem. I thought of a way out. In the Old West, when the frontier doctor had to operate without anesthesia, they called it biting the bullet. When I picked Edna up, I had a inexpensive cassette recorder in the front seat with me and a smile that was actually more than halfway meant. The bullet, when bitten, proved not all that untasty. "Edna," I said, "I hope you don't mind if I use you as an information mine. I'm tired of knowing so little about art while all my better friends seem to be getting so much pleasure out of it. I want to start from the bottom, and let's see how much you can teach me between here and Herb's, okay?" I flipped on the recorder and handed Edna the microphone. "Give me a short overall history of art," I began, "from the caveman drawings through the earliest known painters clear up to the modern trends of today." Edna did it, with some bewilderment at first, but with brio. I then asked her to name the first 10 famous painters whose names flashed across her mental windshield and introduced me to them. Next, I asked her about all the common art terminology, my ignorance of which is precisely what kept me from being interested in art all these years. Cubism, realism, impressionism, dadaism. I recorded Edna's answers and exuberated with the attitude of a student who'd found a way to filch a whole course and save $1,000 in tuition. By the time we got into Picasso's Blue Period, Dali's Melting Watch, and Andy Warhol's Campbell's Soup Can, I was sorry Herb's driveway was just ahead. I felt I'd scored both a long and a short-term gain. Long, I was neither totally uninformed nor totally uninterested in art anymore. Short, the torture rack became a pleasure trip. That's not a bad attitude to bring to your next conversation whenever it breaks out. Maybe you won't have a tape recorder, but maybe you also won't be in action for a whole hour and a half. When doctors promise an injection will only hurt for a second, they mean it. The promise here is that one good burst of effort to start a good conversation will send you on a flying motorcycle crashing through the brittle glass of boredom. It's a good feeling when you break that other kind of sound barrier. That's the only hard part. Summoning up the moral reserves to say to yourself, this party is going to be my entire life for the next 90 minutes. I can be bored or boring, interested or interesting. I can reach out and try to break that glassware that separates people, or I can stay here within my own glass cage and sulk. Whether I wind up making a contact here that will help me fulfill a life goal, or merely exchanging better than usual talk with someone else, this time I'm going to make the effort. If in the middle of that party you think you've got a poem in you that will transform mankind, then by all means sneak it into a quiet room and write it. If you think you've got a screenplay in you that will earn you megatons of dollars and fame, ask the host for some blank paper, slip away, and start writing. Chances are, however, that there's nothing better you can do for yourself in those particular 90 minutes than turn some of those strangers present into allies through conversation. Who now do you haul off and befriend? Only conscience and clergy can counsel you as to whether you should go for the important people, the nice people, the sexy people, the interesting people, the ones able to do you the most favors, or those most in need of whatever it is you might offer. Same techniques of making people talk will work on all of them. A famous and feared New York critic was physically dominating the middle of the floor at a publisher's cocktail party at the Four Seasons, apparently in deep conversation with an attractive woman whom I happened to know. Later, after he left, she came over to me and said, "Strangest thing." He grabbed me the instant I entered and said, "Please, stand with me here and pretend we're having an interesting conversation. I don't happen to know anybody here, and I don't want to be seen standing alone. Let's call that condition 0 and see if we can move upward from there." That critic, a celebrity, feared being exposed as an unloved celebrity, so he bullied his way into a phony show of being okay, conversing in the middle of the heady swirl with a beautiful woman. If he had marched over to anybody in that room, thrust forth his hand, smiled, announced his name, and started a conversation, whomever he targeted would have been dazzled, flattered, uplifted, enriched. And he himself might have learned something, gotten or given a laugh, acquired a useful name on a business card that could get him a difficult reservation if he ever wanted to get out of Hong Kong over a holiday or buy discount linen in Eden, North Carolina. At least he might have had or given a good time. Not this man. He might have had the world's most unerring eye for flaws and virtues in the performances of actors, singers, and dancers, but he deliberately tore up his free tickets to the higher drama of the human mind. We've got phrase makers and word choosers. And blessed is the talker skilled enough to know which to be at a given time. Intercoursing is, in this case, a chosen word. Conversation can acquire thrill power of near erotic magnitude. And it may be plunged into and enjoyed by anyone in the proximity of another person at almost any time without disrobing, breaking a vow, or getting yourself all out of breath, or slapped, or shot, or arrested, or diseased. What if the starter at some great race fired his gun and nobody ran? Yes, that executive could indeed make room for you in his Paris public relations department if he took a liking to you. Yes, that editor could indeed buy your story and, who knows, discuss your taking a whack at a few more. Yes, the investment banker at the party could indeed fund your scheme. The coach could advise your son. The director could audition your niece. The city councilman could put a tree outside of your house. And the delightful lady or gentleman could enthrall you by agreeing to meet you for drinks after work the next day. Those are, however, all obvious targets of opportunity, diamonds blinding even the unskilled naked eye as they lie idly atop the surface. The interesting lesson is that every single person present at a gathering, if he were to go into a voluntary trance and meditate upon all the things he could do to make your ambitions congeal, could come up with a list of potential favors that would qualify him to wear a sign on his head that said, "I may not look like much, but believe me, pal, I'm well worth your getting to know." Sure, we believe in equality of opportunity, brotherhood, and the ideals of the French Revolution and the Judeo-Christian ethic. But when your eye pans outward across the crowd, when you go to work taking the measurements of those in the room, you see a few stars and a lot of extras, spear carriers. I never learned how to turn boring parties into solid gold until I discovered the power of the spear carriers. Believe it or not, those dull, balding, paunchy, coarse, unheard of people own America and run the world. They're the ones who can and will get you out of jail, into the Navy, through customs, seats mid-orchestra on the aisle, high up on the 50-yard line, backstage, ringside, off jury duty until after your vacation, into the secret buffet line with the thick roast beef, over to Europe first class while others are begging on standby, in to see the Pope with only 3 other businessmen and Ecuadorian Monsignor, into the geisha house in Kyoto that tourists never even know about, and close enough to touch the president whenever the tall ships sail. They're the ones who control the complaint department, waiting lists, security and credit checks, service, delivery, and invitation lists to fights and concerts their firms bought over 100 tickets to before they got hot. They're the ones who keep their business cards as ready as terrorists keep grenades. And they look at your card the next day and occasionally remember which one you were. Make them talk, and you're a richer person at party's end, in one currency or another. No, you won't get a personal loan from his new suburban bank if your credit record is a fright. No matter how engagingly you triggered his hilarious recollections of growing up in the Oklahoma panhandle during Prohibition, you'll get only the jump, the edge, the benefit of the doubt, and that's plenty. Wherever you swing your conversational pickaxe, there's gold. And the less likely looking they are, the more they appreciate someone reaching out, taking that painful initiative, breaking their crust and making them talk. There's no art to initiating conversation. There's an art to initiating meaningful conversation. The heat, the rain, the ball game, the president, the Dow, the hijacking, the big divorce, the big indictment, the big upset, the big merger, the big failure. Those glibly trafficked, sure things are excusable. In fact, okay as openers, but if you don't move quickly into richer talk turf, you'll have exposed yourself as a nation with no intellectual assets except a flagpole. Obvious topics that could just as well be discussed by and with anybody who understands the language. Have all the friend-making power of printed love letters. You think that comic who happens to be sitting ringside watching another comic is quick on his feet when the comic who's performing introduces him and invites him to say a few words, whereupon he stands up, comes out of the crowd, and gets some of the biggest laughs of the evening? You're not a fool. You've just been fooled by a clever practitioner who knows that nothing needs more preparation and rehearsal than ad-libs. Should you do any less? Whenever two or more people get together, the group develops a kind of collective mind. What's on it? The most baleful figure at the ball is the one who says, "I've heard so many great jokes lately, but I can't remember a one. I'm going to start writing them down." Let's make him our champion negative role model as we build more and more towering collections of not just jokes, but facts, quotes, obscure news items off to one side of the media mainstream. Zingers and stingers from sources as varied as the inside pages of newspapers. Filler blurbs in magazines. A talk show that boomed through your car radio from a station 1,000 miles away. Or a brilliant remark inadvertently overheard on the way to work. Whatever day it is, that day has news. That week has news. That place has news. Something is on that collective mind. What is it? Think now. All the obvious angles are obvious and therefore of low candle power. Do you happen to have an original angle? Is your slant a fresh, imaginative approach to whatever's going on? If not, read the reaction stories in the newspapers and magazines. The men and women who put those publications together are your personal trained staff of writers and editors constantly on the lookout to hand you material to make you scintillate. And they charge you only pennies a day. Gee, wasn't that royal wedding something? Is a remark that, like truck stop broccoli, has all the nutrients deliberately boiled out. That remark is incapable of impressing. What did you think of the royal wedding? Is not much better. I was interested in that comment from an ordinary Londoner on TV who, right in the middle of all the pageantry around the royal wedding, said of Britain's plight, "Well, it looks like the Japanese are good at manufacturing electronic equipment, and we're good at staging ceremonies." That's nourishment. Everybody goes to the party totally in control of how he or she looks. Everybody goes to the party totally in control of how he or she acts. Almost nobody, though, ever goes to a party with any forethought about what he or she is going to say. People have been known to stay home from parties, good ones, because I haven't got a thing to wear. Didn't anybody ever yell from a dressing room to a husband or wife pacing impatiently in the hallway, "Go ahead without me, dear. I haven't got a thing to say"? Although that is a much better reason to stay home. Party bound, everybody figures he or she will just mosey on in have a drink, grab a toothpick with a cube of orange cheese on the end of it, see who's there, shake a few hands, exchange a few names, and wait and see what comes up. Try dressing like that one time. Try picking your wardrobe blindfolded, or let a monkey do it for you. You can do better. Get some material together. You don't need joke writers, although one good line that makes them laugh is worth 1,000 shrewd observations on curious shifts in the Romanian Politburo. Start with the newspaper. What's going on? Not just in the world, but most especially in the worlds of those you're likely to be meeting. Talk to yourself. What are your instinctive first comments? Are they standard, flat-footed, obvious, dull? Improve them. Don't push over your desk now and storm out of the classroom complaining that if you could improve them, you'd be down at the newspaper office writing the columns for dullards like you to read before they start putting people to sleep at parties. Don't give up so fast. There's a journalism course you can take immediately that I feel is superior to that offered at some of our so-called major universities. This course does not take 4 years. It takes 3 words. They are: penetrate the ostensible. That's so much fun that it seems more a toy than a teaching. Play with it. Whatever the news is, decide what those putting forth the story want us to believe. That's the ostensible story. Now then, like hungry raccoons, push over the garbage can and nose around to see what's good inside. Ostensibly, one night in Pakistan in the early 1970s, Henry Kissinger got a stomach ache and went to bed early. Actually, he faked the stomach ache so he could slip away to the airport and take a plane to Peking for the breathtakingly historic meeting with Mao Zedong. That's admittedly a pretty tightly wrapped can, and no shame accrues to whosoever saw Henry leave that party and failed to conclude. Ostensibly, he's ill, but I think he's really planning a history-making night flight. Other ostensibles, however, are easier to penetrate. A congressman suddenly lashes out against slumlords. Did slumlords just start? Did he just learn of their activities? Are those activities so exceptionally nefarious at this particular time that despite his 4 terms of silence on the matter, his conscience compels him to lash out without further delay? Possibly. Quite possibly. On another hand, however, his anti-slumlord assault may be early cannon in a Senate race he alone knows he's just started waging. Or he may have just learned that the real estate interests have met, ostensibly socially, and decided to back his opponent in the primary. Or he may have been advised that those real estate moguls have come up with something damaging against him, and he wanted to hit first so their forthcoming disclosures could more convincingly be dismissed as political backbiting when they come flying. Maybe this, maybe that, maybe yes, maybe no. Regardless, the cause of conversation, at least, is much better served than with a bland helping of, hey, how about what that congressman said about those slumlords? Ostensibly, the black militant leader and the black moderate leader are ready, judging from their comments, to cross-lacerate one another on sight. Perhaps. But couldn't it also be that they're working closely together? A well-orchestrated trapeze act designed to let the black moderates say to the white power structure, look, if you don't give me something to better my people's lot and make me look successful, our embattled masses will shove me aside, and then you'll have to deal with him, the unpredictable and uncontrollable militant extremist. On the other hand, looking at it another way, however, turn the page and pretend for a minute that, have you considered another possibility instead? Many a conversation has been saved and stimulated and even sent soaring by on the other handing. Someone shifting the conversational spotlight to more interesting parts of the stage. You don't need much grasp of things either. Just penetrate the ostensible. That lesson pays off, not just in conversations, but all over life itself. Does your tour driver tell you the beach at Ashdod is just like the beach in Tel Aviv because it's true? Or because he fears you'd want to take a walk in the Ashdod surf if you saw how nice it was, and he'll make no extra money for the wait? Had that fourth-rate screenwriter in Hollywood been closer to a third-rate screenwriter, he might have penetrated the ostensible that memorable night and not felt falsely flattered all those years. Alas, he never caught on. At 2:30 one morning, his doorbell rang. He opened the door to find, to his unbridled astonishment, a famous film producer who said, "Look, don't cry out. I had to do it this way to get around company spies. Let me get right to the point. I've thought for a long time that you're one of the most underrated writing talents in this town, and I want you to head up the writing team for a film I'm planning for the fall. Top dollar, strictest confidence. Don't even tell your wife. Congratulations, and by the way, please forgive my unorthodox manner of approach. Hollywood's seen a lot of different kinds of people, but so far they haven't yet seen a fourth-rate writer who doesn't agree with a producer who says he's the most underrated talent in town." Well, the poor guy never found out was that the producer was never looking for him in the first place. He was going to meet his actress mistress late that night, and he accidentally went to the wrong house. He recognized his mistake the instant the writer opened the door and quickly invented all that business about the admiration and the spies and the new film just to keep the secrecy of his affair intact. Now, this producer is a philandering rogue for whom we hold no brief, but in this case, he was better at manufacturing instant ostensibles than the writer was at conspiratorial penetration. It's fun. It's fulfilling. Never leave an ostensible unpenetrated. Starting things going conversationally takes work. Standing there and letting one lap over you is easy. Why should you have to work? Why should you have to assume the burden of making the conversation happen? Why should you have to arrange the fireworks display? Fair questions. Another fair question is why you're there in the first place. What is your mission at the party? Are you there to kill 90 minutes or so, acquire some celery, some peanuts, 6 to 8 canopies laced with cheese, anchovies, caviar, and red pepper, and 2.5 glasses of white wine? Or are you there to gather some new allies, maybe 4 or 5 on a good night, in your ongoing battle for supremacy? Allies who will accept your phone calls cheerfully and give you whatever help you reasonably request. If the former, you needn't bestir yourself. If the latter, however, you're assuming the burden, taking the initiative, actually accepting responsibility for getting some good conversation crackling, instantly separates you from the rest of mankind and lets one and all know you're a good, reliable social soldier. Try to find out what field someone's in without asking directly. Remember, the direct question, "What do you do?" robs the moment of the spin weaving that brightens tapestries and nourishes friendships. At worst, The person may be insulted or think you're stupid if you don't already know. Drop early on what field you're in. Don't do it kerplunk, like a bowling ball at the feet that challenges him or her to tell you what field he or she is in, or be exposed as a sorehead. Dance it through. I'm in raw cotton, and those intrigues like the one between the governor and that deputy commissioner make me feel right at home. The Italians have perfected a feel-good trick that's so effective. It's amazing the rest of the world didn't steal it along with pizza. No matter who you are, no matter that they don't know you, no matter that the odds dictate they'll never see you again, Italian waiters nonetheless instinctively promote you. Take a seat in any restaurant in Italy and watch. The waiter will address you as dottore, doctor, commendatore, commandant, or some other insanity that says, you may not possess precisely the lofty title I just awarded you, but your entire manner, bearing, demeanor, and persona bespeak a special kind of magnificence, and I dare not address you with any lesser title than the one I just invented. That's why the shabbiest bum in the place will be at least capitano, captain. You don't have to come flat out and say to someone you've just met, you're impressive. You strike me as a major industrialist. There are other ways to play the Italian game to flush out his livelihood and get some good talk going without asking directly, what do you do? Look, you obviously have to make a lot of decisions for a living. How do you feel about the Senate bill? With a schedule like you must have, how do you manage to get in all your required business reading? I'm always curious to learn if successful people sought their present businesses or stumbled into them. You probably have to travel a lot more than most of us. If, for example, the person shows genuine glimmers of higher intelligence, particularly on those issues that excite politicians, watch the temperature needle in his eyes elevate when you ask, I'm sure this isn't the first time you've been asked this, but have you ever considered seeking elective office? Assuming the obligation to get a conversation going is more than half the challenge, it's fully 3/4. The rest is developing a sense of effortlessness, the pianist's hands, the dancer's feet, the golfer's swing, the ball player's catch, all achieve a higher nobility when they appear instinctive, automatic, doing what comes naturally, effortless. The man who calls his loving wife from the office to plan dinner seems a lot more effortless in that mission than the adolescent who sits 4 seats behind the head cheerleader in algebra class asking her for a date Saturday night. The difference is confidence, certainty of acceptance and success. Starting and sustaining relationship-nourishing conversations need not be improvisational theater. It can be a hit you thought out well, even scripted. Avoid any phrase, gesture, mannerism, utterance that blows its whistle, alerts the room, and reveals you as really saying, look at here, folks, I'm trying to start a conversation. Let it all be natural, organic, effortless. The dynamite opening and the smooth intro aren't all that important. A sort of natural amnesty allows us all 10 or 12 seconds of awkwardness getting started. From that point forward, you've got ways to make sure the dice are loaded on your side. At a party one Saturday night, celebrating the retirement of a famous TV radio personality, his producer rose, raised his glass, and said, "This one's to me. At last, tomorrow morning, for the first time in 10 years, I can read the Sunday papers for fun." All laughed knowingly. As many times As there are huddles in a football game, there are at least that many conferences inside the production offices of every TV and radio talk show on the air. The question is always the same. What are they interested in now? The most meaningful scolding I ever received from a boss in broadcasting came from Jane Strauss, who at the time was program director of WMCA and less than half my age. When I listen to your program, she said, I can always tell when you're tired. That's when you talk about anti-communist uprisings and freedom fighters in Eastern Europe. Bullseye. Boxers get tired and let their arms droop in mid-ring. When talk show hosts get tired, they tend to forget what might interest the public and curl right up into that which interests them. I wasn't the only one on Jean's list. She regaled me with complaints about my brother broadcasters and how she could tell when they were tired. One, according to Jean, talked only about golf when he was tired. Another only about extramarital relations. And a third only about the scandalous care given the horses that pull the carriages full of tourists through New York Central Park. Bullseyes all around. You may cringe from the awesomeness of it all, but you are a broadcasting station. Everything you say is your talk show. It may keep people interested or put their feet to sleep up to the hips within 35 seconds. Your show has a rating. You can make it higher the very same way the pros do. Pick up your newspaper and magazines, books, encyclopedias, all the excitement minds mentioned earlier, and go into a kind of production meeting with yourself. This time, don't read for fun. Don't skim and skip only to what interests you. Grasshopper around all the possibilities of what interests them, others, the world, your audience, your targets. Old-style navigation called for compensation, knowing according to the longitude of your position how much deviation your compass suffered between true north and magnetic north. Try to develop the knack of knowing the degree of likelihood that what interests you will also interest them. That's hard. Our instinct when people yawn at our most treasured tales is to denounce them inwardly as a tribe of dolts and go look for new, brighter, and more attentive people. Professionals put all that disappointment and ego rattling behind a cadmium shield and coolly continue looking for what works. You win insofar as you get a good idea of the size and shape of the gulf between what interests you and what interests them. If your act isn't making it with the ones you talk to, at least develop the sense to notice it, the grace to quit, and the determination to develop a new act. If you don't strike oil rather promptly, quit boring. Rework the act. No man in history ever yawned, looked at his watch, or let his eye wander when the woman he craved confronted him eye to eye and confessed undying love. She had certain advantages going in. You can build your advantages by gathering material and devising ways to spice up conversations through deft injections of the right shtick at the right time. Remember, show and tell, a standing feature of every school in every democracy from kindergarten through grade 4, in which the children are encouraged to stand up before the class and report, express themselves, tell about their trip to an uncle's farm over the weekend, a movie they saw, a book their mother brought them from Baltimore, an argument about the president around last night's dinner table, Anything that might engross the other kids, hold their interest, make them want more. In dictatorships, there's no show and tell. There's no encouragement to stand up and express yourself, but rather to shut up, listen closely, and repeat after me. The shame of show and tell is the kids who were good at it, loved it, and got better and became cheerleaders, editors of the school newspaper, and class presidents. And the ones who were bad at it sat there assuming that at the age of 8 they had found their rightful place, the audience. They're still sitting there. They're sitting there feeling shy, inarticulate, lucky to be granted at least a non-speaking role in the group. They smile as they tell you, I'm not good at speaking. You're allowed another shot, you know. You can recover from your show and tell failure of even 50 years ago by seizing upon something interesting they'll want to hear and learning how to belt it out. Try it tomorrow or tonight or 5 minutes from now or whenever your audience gathers. Your material will have little in common with what you tried on them in the 2nd grade. One thing will be identical, though. A good performance would have made you more popular then, and a good performance will make you more popular now. Conversationally, right now, what works best may be found in the subjects chosen by the talk shows and the print press. A lot of people are paid well not to make mistakes in diagnosing what grabs the public at the moment. Put those well-paid diagnosticians to work for you at no cost. Notice what they, the pros, think we, the people, want to know, hear, discuss, debate, explore, and learn more about today. Careful, they're far from always right. That's why producers and editors get fired so often. Shows with low ratings go off the air, and publications with poor readership get purchased or merged. Their collective guesswork remains, however, a pretty good guide. Be aware that the responsible newspaper is going to carry a major page 1 story on a shakeup in the Togo cabinet, though they're perfectly aware nobody will read it. Meanwhile, the screaming Mimi's tabloid will headline a divorce lawyer caught sleeping with his secretary, even if the 1.2 million Chinese troops that just crossed the Ussuri River and invaded the Soviet Union have to be bumped over to page 5. Take notes, keep files. The funniest thing in the world has happened to you 35 times in the past year. How many can you remember? Remembering them 10 seconds after they would have lent an explosive lift to a conversation doesn't count. How then can you retrieve the good stuff when you need it? Simply add those little notes to your daily required reading. We long ago made machines stronger than the human arm, but it will be a while yet before we devise a computer sharper than the human brain. The situation itself will draw the right anecdote from your mental treasury if you've reviewed your collection often enough. Nothing feels less natural than that first golf swing with the teacher standing there and his 18 vital things to do and not do ricocheting half remembered through your head. We'll return to that first golf lesson soon for a lesson that has nothing to do with golf. Forget everything for the moment, except the name of this chapter. Go into your next audience bearing in mind only that this time you're going to try to start the conversation and keep it going. Get in there and assume the burden. You'll be pleased and surprised at your success. The good talker, who's always good at making others talk, is a likelier candidate for success than the good talker. He's a much better candidate than the non-contributory onlooker who'd sooner start a fight than a conversation. The people of Sweden, by the way, know they have a problem making good conversation and they don't mind dealing with it. The only people they say worse at talking than Swedes are the neighboring Finns. Both are known to drink rather well. The legend tells us a Swede and his Finnish friend met in a little hut north of the Arctic Circle one day to engage in a friendly drinking bout. Along about halfway through the second quart of pure akvavit, the Swede wobblingly hoisted his glass and said, "Skål! Cheers!" Whereupon the Finn slammed his glass down upon the table and said, "Damn it, did you come here to drink or talk?"